Welcome to the Winning with Shopify podcast. This is the podcast to help you scale your Shopify store into a money-making machine. Do you want to increase conversions by as much as 54% for your Shopify store? Now you can with Alia Learn. Reward new site visitors for learning about your products and brands through Alia's engaging on-site app. Want to find out more? Alia Learn are offering an exclusive 1-month free trial for WWS listeners. To claim your free offer, go to alialearn.com/winningwithshopify and book a consultation. Now, over to your host, Nick Truman.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Winning with Shopify podcast. For anyone that's not tuned in before, it's a pleasure to have you tuning in. It's absolutely delight that you've clicked on the pinkest, brightest podcast logo that you have ever seen in your lives. We also have a slightly new logo coming out next year. It's not a massive change, but it's a subtle change. So if you suddenly see that change, please drop us a note, and we may even send you a little prize for noticing the week when it changed. So keep an eye out for that. If you've been tuning in for a while, welcome back. We could not do this show without you. It's an absolute honor to have you guys tuning in, week out. Thank you for all your questions over the last few weeks as well. And carrying on from last week where we spoke to Corey, who runs an amazing business, and these guys are sponsoring this month as well. And we are talking, which is quite exciting, I think, about how to incentivize customers. We're looking at conversion rates, and we're going to be talking to one of Corey's merchants as well this week, one of his clients, which can be very, very exciting. His name is Tyler Farley, and he's from a business called Better Than Belts. So Tyler, without further ado, welcome to the show.
Nick, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And as we do with all of our guests, Tyler, why don't you just give us a quick overview to, firstly, your background, and then secondly, how did you get involved in running Better Than Belts?
Yeah, 100%. So I studied entrepreneurship and marketing, and I had gone to school in Boston where I had a bit of a tech startup background. And going into my final year of college at Northeastern University, I had stopped wearing belts. I was tired of adjusting them. Pretty much when I was standing up, sitting down, my weight had been fluctuating. And it was truly a single pair of jeans that I bought that I was like, these are great. I need to find a way to wear these. And that's when I started to look into suspenders or braces. And I was surprised that every suspender on the market was either incredibly expensive formal wear or a poorly made Halloween costume, or really heavy-duty blue-collar workwear. So I was a little bit surprised that there wasn't yet a modern suspender for any person to wear for any age, any gender, any occasion, dressed up or dressed down. And I thought that sounded like a fun problem to tackle. So I work with a factory in New York City and launched on Kickstarter around 4 years ago.
Amazing. And I mean, you made a slight joke in there, which I'm going to flag quickly, which is, in the UK, suspenders are, some people do call braces suspenders, but we generally call them braces here. Suspenders is something you generally keep for the bedroom. If you want to Google that with the UK and search, safe search, whatever it's called on Google off, then be my guest. But I find it amazing. So many of our guests have a similar, but obviously very unique story like yourself. Where you had a problem and you thought, you know what, we can solve this problem. And I imagine there's also an element of fashion in there as well, even though us guys, we don't really like using the F word fashion because we just think like it's practical. What we're thinking is like, it makes me look good is generally what we're thinking. So how much did you integrate the kind of fashion side of things, as well as you say, you didn't want to wear a belt, but hence the name Better Than Belt?
Yeah, I have always been incredibly interested in fashion and haven't really shied away from it. I love new brands that are making new things or fixing small problems, big problems, and everything in between, as well as seeing maybe the innovation coming from big brands. I started over a decade ago collecting sneakers, which was kind of my foray into it all. It was basketball shoes, which became the Jordans and all Nike and so on. And that then bled into fashion itself. So I'd always been really interested in fashion, which is, I think, why I was probably more keen to notice an issue in kind of the lack of this modern suspender. And it was also really exciting for me because I like consumer goods. I liked to have something that, as a suspender too, it like is complementing a lot of additional fashion that you may be wearing or that I was wearing, whether it was pants or shirts or anything else. So not only was it had this fashionable element, but it also had a like aggressively utilitarian element, which I really appreciated. That I loved that I would roll out of bed in the morning, especially if this was my senior year of college, I would grab whatever pants had suspenders connected to it, slip it on, and sprint to class. And then I would get complimented on how I was dressed. And I was wearing like the t-shirt I had slept in and just like the pants that had suspenders attached. But adding something like a suspender adds a level of formality without sacrificing comfort. And that's something that really resonated with me.
Nice, nice. And I imagine, I mean, any product, right? You got to sell it with some element of this is going to make you look good. It's going to make you feel better. And interestingly, actually, something that's come up a lot, certainly over cyber weekends, which obviously a week or so ago now. But at the time of recording this, we're right in the thick of it, actually. But we're doing more and more on display advertising over cyber weekend each year, and it's a great way to just kind of say like, hey, we've got a massive sale on. It's one of the few times that you have a real call to action, which is like 50% off or 30% off. Come buy all of our stuff and do that now. And interestingly, Google do actually have a policy which it's adjusted again slightly recently, but the policy generally is you can't sort of sell like or use images to sell something where the image is more focused on the person wearing it, like a really attractive, really slim, and all the kind of stereotypical, what makes someone good looking. Which I personally think is a load of absolute nonsense, in my opinion. But that's a different podcast and different topic. But I do think Google have got a good process with this, saying you have to feature the product more in the image than the person. So rather than showing like a whole shot of a person and actually this is just for like a small ring or something that you can barely see, it's got to be a close up of the ring. So you can have someone's face in it, but the ring has to be like the most important part of this. And so I think, as you say, I think having that background in fashion must help you a lot in terms of designing products and coming up with different styles, different fashion. Certainly moving with the fashion, I imagine things must have changed a little bit, even in the period of time you've been involved.
Yeah, definitely. Not only changes within fashion, but especially like within advertising too. Like obviously changes to like Facebook's advertising rules and everything. We're changing so frequently. And I think what you were saying in terms of seeing what other brands are doing was kind of integral to a lot of our start in advertising because it was a lot of time spent on Facebook Ads Library looking at what other brands were doing, whether it was heavy product focus or more kind of lifestyle photography, if we're just going to call that being a stereotypical hot person sitting somewhere. What was really key to me originally with Better Than Belts, bless you. What
Thank
was
you.
originally
Apologies.
key, no, all good. What was originally key was showing the diverse audience I was hoping for in suspenders, because when you Google suspenders, 90% of photos are the same 40-year-old white man in a white shirt with black suspenders. So I really wanted to show a more diverse, kind of accurate audience, showing the world of people of different colors, shapes, and sizes wearing suspenders, dressed up, dressed down, and not just black suspenders, wearing striped suspenders, a flamingo pattern, and really showing kind of the versatility. And I would get many questions from customers and people early on of like, do you make a women's suspender? And I was like, if we're talking like an inch of elastic and some leather and some clips, like there's nothing gendered about this in any way. There's height, and we have a few different height sizes for that. But that was something I was really trying to showcase, is kind of the diverse group of and I was trying to showcase the diverse group that can benefit from wearing suspenders.
Absolutely. And I love that you've touched on a really big topic that I think we should talk about and get your view on this as well. And the big topic, sorry, as well, just to be really clear to everyone listening, like it's not necessarily the diversity element. I think that's got to be a given these days. I think there's no excuse for going, whoever the product is traditionally worn by. I actually think the biggest marketing opportunity you've got is to challenge that, is to really challenge it. And I think certainly, I mean, I've started wearing flat caps here in the UK and I'm in my early 30s, and no one looks at me and goes, that young man's wearing an old person's hat. It's like, no, loads of young people wear them now and they've become really fashionable. And my wife likes it as well. So if you're listening, honey, then yeah, I do listen. But I think the thing you've mentioned there that I think is really, really key actually from a merchant's point of view that I think is worth talking about is you said that you get emails from your customers and certainly asking, do you do a women's one? And I love the reaction. If you're listening on iTunes, you won't have seen Tyler's reaction, but like a kind of mind blown moment of like, it's the same product. It's just, you're just potentially slightly shorter, but not necessarily. It's like, it's just, we can certainly adjust this, or you could literally just wear the products we've got, or we just need to put the word women's on it now and make it clear these are for women. And we actually had a lady who she got a little bit unwell when she was pregnant, so she started making her own smoothies. And these smoothies really helped her through her pregnancy. So that became her first target audience when she started her store. And then her people saying like, I'm not pregnant. Is it safe to take this? She's like, it's just some berries and some milk and some protein powder or whatever. Like, of course it's safe. Like, you can make your own. It's just we make it really convenient. That's why you want to buy from us. But the topic really is talking to customers. I mean, you must have, that can't have been the only situation actually where you spoke to your customers and learned something along that process. I mean, have you got any other examples or even a sort of a unique method of the way you speak to your customers to get information from them to provide the best products?
That's a fantastic question. And I think the most helpful thing starting out is talking to customers and kind of ongoing, but the key to actually launching and talking to customers. And one reason why I really benefited from running a Kickstarter is because it's a 30-day period where you're developing a lot of super fans that one you can communicate with, to learn more from, even online and digitally. But also during that 30-day period, we did a lot of in-person marketing at conferences and events, where I was at HubSpot's inbound conference here at Boston, going up to pretty much everybody I could find, asking them to try on suspenders and give us feedback, and one, collecting short videos of people throwing their belts on the ground while wearing suspenders, to then be able to put these videos of these people on our Kickstarter, kind of tie them to us, but also to get their feedback from it from people that, one, don't like suspenders, don't want to wear suspenders, and then are surprised they kind of like them, or people that love suspenders and are glad to find a new brand or something kind of additional that we were offering, or folks that had never even considered suspenders, but once they tried them on were happy about it. And to get those conversations live from people who were our target demographic, to understand where they're buying, what their thoughts are, especially even with the Kickstarter. Like, there was one bit of feedback that we got early on from somebody who was a super backer on Kickstarter and backed a lot of projects, that he would never back our project because he was worried that we wouldn't actually ship anything, which is a really valid concern. Something that happens a lot with Kickstarter. So what we did was kind of prove that we have our first run of inventory, and to show that, to show our first run of inventory kind of as social proof on our Kickstarter is enough to get people to know, like, we actually have this product. We're not just showing you like 3D mock-ups.
Yeah, I think that's one of my biggest fears personally with Kickstarter and Indiegogo and all the other platform crowdfunder is that you see these things and it's like, it's only at concept stage. So I've got to commit to buy this thing, even if it doesn't work or there's no evidence of it. So I think it's fine if you've got a prototype, or as you say, I think, I just want to highlight, I know you've highlighted it really well. I want to highlight it as well, actually. They're running around, you said it's a HubSpot conference, and you were just saying to people, try this on, and they're going, this is quite cool, actually. And it's almost showing that you buy this product, an instant transformation. It's like, it's literally instant. And I think the biggest thing I found, certainly with wearing belts, is if you get the belt in slightly the wrong position on a long drive, and obviously for me, a long drive is like 2 or 3 hours here on our little island in the UK. We can manage like 11 or 12 on us. If we choose exactly the right route, we can go that long. But certainly in the US, you sit down a long drive and you've got a big, very American like Chevy belt buckle or something, and you sit down, that thing is going to leave a mark, like, on your stomach, and especially if you eat as much as I do. But I think it's amazing, actually. I think you've broken down so many barriers for the customer there. Of like, so on Kickstarter, so there's some sort of discount, or you can be a pioneer, or both. There's also the element of it's so easy to wear, and you can see these people having an instant transformation to this thing. It starts to break down all those barriers, and you've done something super fun where it's like, we just ran around a conference and look, people wanted to wear this stuff. You can join that group as well. So how has that approach evolved then to work with Corey and the guys and start using learning videos? Like, talk me through that process and how you guys started using it and what you use it for.
100%. It's hard to scale physically going to conferences and physically asking people to try things on and telling them about your brand.
Yeah.
Whereas being able to showcase who you are and what your brand is, and getting customers to kind of to lead the charge in their education of your brand, forward first on the website, is pretty revolutionary, which is why I was very excited when I first met Corey and Sean and found out what they were working on with Alia. I had started Better Than Belts in 2019 with my sister as well, and going into the pandemic, all of our wholesale strategies were out the window, and then we were leaning solely into e-commerce, and we physically weren't going to conferences. A lot of that didn't exist. So our top of funnel middle funnel, bottom of funnel, all of our advertising, all of our emails, all of our like social was all kind of targeted at, right? Education right at the top. And that was something that really stood out to me about Alia, where I could, instead of putting money into a top of funnel ad for people that I'm hoping to get to my website or testing out different content in ads, I can instead incorporate some of that learning onto my website, and I can incentivize customers. And this is coming from a big shift away from Facebook and Google. I believe something around 50% of venture capital dollars raised are given directly to Facebook and Google in terms of advertising. And that's a pretty huge amount of money when like to achieve like a positive ROAS is pretty difficult. And unless you have people really on top of it, you might not be able to get there. And I can talk a lot about attribution and that forever. But so that was one thing that really stood out to me about Alia, as well as another brand that's called Trying Your Best. It's TYB.xyz, if you've heard of it. It's started by Tyler Haney, who's the founder of Outdoor Voices too. And she's going after a very similar mission with a very different product, but essentially trying to get money out of advertisers and instead into your customers.
Hang on, the lights have just turned off. Hang on, they're on a sensor, sorry.
All good.
Fortunately, you'd finished talking when that happened. Yeah, apologies. Sorry, they're on a sensor, and where I'm sitting, the sensor can't actually see me. I might, yeah, if it happens again, I'll ask one of the team just to keep running back and forth every now and then. Sorry, I completely lost where we were. So we're talking about attribution, then you said about Try Your Best as an alternative to Alia.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't say alternative, but Trying Your Best is a company that essentially offers a version of Slack for your community. And if you want to engage with people very directly in like a one-on-one way, it's a very similar mission of taking money away from venture capital firms and putting them into your customers. And that's what really stood out to me about Alia. And what I really liked about Alia is that it was pinned at the front of your website, and it didn't require very strong, it didn't have a very high barrier to entry for customers to learn about you and then to gain a discount code or gain some product.
Yeah, amazing. Let's come back to that conversation about Google, Meta, ROI, because I think it's quite interesting for our listeners. Certainly some of them will be listening and going, what? I was heading down that route. Like, why is that bad? And I think it'd be really good to cover that. But let's stick with Alia for a second. So obviously it's worked really well in terms of educating your customers. And I imagine, some of the stats Corey was sharing with us last week were absolutely phenomenal. So if anyone missed last week's episode, go and listen to that so you know exactly what we're talking about. But I couldn't believe it was like 30 to 40% conversion rates once someone had been through learning. I haven't got the exact numbers to hand, but go back and listen to that episode, guys. It was absolutely incredible. So what kind of content do you actually put on there? Like, what if I was a user and I came on the website and it was like, okay, Alia, bang, here it is. You're going to use our bit of software. What's the actual thing they're engaging with? Can you explain that process, especially people that are just listening and not necessarily watching this?
Totally. And Alia works into your existing acquisition funnel if you currently have a funnel for customer acquisition. So for me, Alia is satisfying this top of funnel, middle of funnel, where I typically want somebody to learn a bit more about the brand and they're not quite at like a purchase flow. But Alia gets to actually speed up that process, which otherwise could be months, to instead have people intentionally interacting with content from the start. So a lot of Alia for me early on was sharing about the origin of Better Than Belts and what we stand for, and also showcasing that we're a small business, but we're legitimate. Like, we will mail out suspenders. You do get products in the mail. Our reviews are real. Everything about this brand is real.
Amazing. And what kind of rewards are you giving people then if they watch that video or engage with that bit of content to say, this is what we're about and the mission that we're on?
I have been a spin to win user for a while. Those spin wheels that show up on a website, put in your email, you get 15, 50, whatever percent off. And I am and have been a big fan of those as well. I like Alia because I was giving, say, the same 10 to 30% off discount. I ended up using 20% a lot, but was actually running a 40% for Cyber Monday, which is today. But when you're listening to this, will have been last week. So typically around a 20% reward for having completed either some lessons about the brand, or the use case that I fell in love with once Alia had launched the feature was polls. So we in a general sense, are either like big brands are paying for third-party data where they might give you a huge list of emails. They're like, these are all of our customers, tell us about them. How old are they? Where are they located? All this information. And same would come instead from like your Facebook targeting, but you kind of lose touch a little bit when it becomes third-party data. So Alia is now offering zero-party data by being able to offer polling directly on the website. So our Cyber Monday and Black Friday ad, sorry, not ad, our Cyber Monday and Black Friday Alia campaign on our website was actually just 5 poll questions for some demographic data, as well as a little bit of like people's like purchasing habits, as well as what suspenders stuck out to them. So to get some of that like active data, and then people are earning their discount as opposed to just like receiving something. And I think it becomes a bit more like they feel like they're receiving something for the value they're providing.
Yeah, and it's absolutely amazing. I think it's the human psyche, isn't it? Of going, if I just give you 30-40% off or even 10% off as a discount, your thought is like, well, it was never worth that in the first place. You're just knocking that off. If you've made me earn that, I think we all have to be challenged. We often call it in UX gamification. So we gamify that process. It's a bit like loyalty points. It's going, if you spend £50 more before the end of the year, you get a free coffee. And it's like, oh, let's do it. Not realizing a coffee costs us 10p to actually make the coffee and hand it to you, or whatever the incentive is. But it's that gamification of I've won something, which is a dopamine release, and it's all that kind of stuff. It's fascinating to see the way it works. If you just give somebody something, the dopamine effect of that compared to somebody earning or winning something through some level of competition or competing or completing an exercise, you say like going through some poll questions. It's amazing to then see like I've earned this, and I'd be absolutely stupid, like really stupid, not to use it now that I've earned it. It's a really, really clever psyche. And what I love is it kind of puts marketing back in the world of digital, rather than it just being here's a marketplace of products, choose the one you want, buy it now. We've got the biggest range in the world, but our filtering system's rubbish. So good luck. Into the site you go, see what happens. I think it really brings marketing back to life. And I think certainly in the UK, I mean, you call them gas stations, we call them petrol stations. But they're really good at stuff like this, like loyalty bonus points, where they give you like a scratch card and you kind of rub it out and you're like, you didn't win this time. You're like, well, I'm going to come back because next time I might win a free fuel tank, and that's going to save me like $100 or something. So that's really cool. Except you guys use a lot more fuel than we do. That was quite surprising when I was in the US. But I think it's an amazing way of doing that. And I love what you're saying about as well about data. I didn't actually thought about that. You're literally getting zero party data because people are sharing this with you. Can you then, I say, can you and do you then look at the statistics to say, actually, this demographic, we're filling out the discount code, but they're not purchasing from us. So we know they're on our site, we know they're asking questions, but then they're not doing anything. Do you analyze data in that granular level to then go, well, we need to check, maybe we change the models we're using on the site to meet that demographic to try and get those guys, encourage those guys to purchase?
Yeah, we can definitely look at what is converting off of people that we're filling things out to then know, okay, this answer often got a purchase, this answer did not get a purchase. Like people that want black suspenders ended up purchasing red suspenders, and people that want red suspenders didn't purchase anything. Why do we think that happened?
Yep.
Alia offers that level of detail, which I really appreciate on the zero party data front, because the alternative and what brands have been doing for a long time, and many are still doing, spending millions a month, is, I could spend the equivalent of $5 on getting somebody's email or getting their information. Like I could go to Facebook and I could target people in X area with X age that want this thing, and I could give $5 to Facebook to get that person. Or I could just then give that person $5 credit for them filling out the answers themselves. So I really like the marketplace shift towards people seeing that their data is worth something instead of it just being mined somewhere else and giving it to that third party.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the kind of like tech tool world, which, given my agency does PPC and SEO, we have loads of tools. There used to be tools you could use, and you could only use it for 24 hours if you paid with a tweet. And if you want to use it again tomorrow, pay with another tweet. And they started trending on Twitter a lot before it was called X. So there's stuff like that I've seen that's been really useful actually, and it's a great way of engaging, because then it's like now the exposure is like everyone in the SEO world knows exactly what tool that is, and they know it's there because they see it on Twitter like crazy. Obviously, if you're a Twitter user. I love that red-black situation of like, I really wanted black suspenders, but actually I bought red ones. I still feel weird saying that word, by the way. I would just say that as a Brit because it is something else here. So
We can.
yeah, I'll call it bracelet, but most of our audience, you guys are based in the US, so I'll call it that for you. But it's fascinating actually when you start to, as I say, look at the sort of psyche of customers and how like irrational, illogical, and sometimes what in the data actually looks like they're really stupid. They're not. Your website's doing a good job of convincing them they want this color instead of that color. But we see it a lot, certainly in PPC and SEO, where we send traffic into certain products. And so often when you look at a report, almost like the ads, they're clicking on Google shopping listings of that product. We so often see that people have come in from Google shopping, clicking on a blue t-shirt, and then they buy an orange dress. And you're like, what? That's nothing to do with what you clicked on. And then trying to explain to our clients as well that like, just because they clicked on the blue one doesn't mean they want the blue one. That was just the one that brought them into the site. And then one of our tools on the site knows they've been on other websites recently, so it has them in their database and says, actually, they're more interested in orange products, so we're going to push some orange products to them, and then they buy an orange product, which means it's doing what it should. So actually, there's nothing wrong with that journey. That journey is absolutely fine. But yeah, I find it funny, like you probably see it in that zero-party data as well. Customers saying, I came because I really wanted this product, but I've actually, and then you look at the purchase data, like, but you haven't bought that, like, which might then lead into an email campaign going, you bought this one, but actually you can have that color as well if you want.
Definitely. And I think something I learned early on was that your loudest customer is not indicative of all of your customers. When I launched on Kickstarter, we had 6 colors, patterns. 5 of them were a variation of a 3-stripe suspender, and the 6th one was a very bright, aggressive flamingo pattern. In all of my interviews and everything feedback going into it, people loved the flamingo one. Everybody wanted that. I then ordered more flamingo suspenders than the other colors. And then in the actual Kickstarter, when it became time to survey people for their rewards, nobody chose the flamingo.
Yeah.
And I still have a small amount of that inventory from 4 years ago, whereas I have sold and restocked the 3-stripe like many times over by now.
Yep.
So what people's eyes are drawn to, what our own eyes are drawn to, is not necessarily because we want that specific product. It might be because that like stood out to us. And then it's kind of on you to have a really strong enough brand where even though I clicked on your website for the blue dress, I didn't like your brand enough where I've been in the market for an orange shirt. I'm going to buy my orange shirt from you.
Yeah. Well, we had a very similar experience actually in a Shopify store I ran years ago, where we were selling bamboo sunglasses, and we were going to offer like 1,000 different models of them and just buy one of each and make it look like, oh, loads of our stuff's getting out of stock, like, buy it quickly. And we ended up, when we spoke to the supplier, it was so much cheaper to buy loads of units of just 2 different models. So we chose 2. And ironically, the one that was cheaper sold more of them, and considerably more. Like we restocked that 10 times before we restocked. So there's one that was a kind of wooden kind of effect on the front of the glasses, and one that was black plastic. And the black plastic ones, they were easily the most popular color. When we look on other bamboo sunglasses stores, it was always the plastic black ones with bamboo arms. They were the ones that, or temples, I think they're actually called. They were the ones everyone was pushing, but we sold out of these wooden ones like crazy. And we put the price of the wooden ones out, even though they cost us less. We doubled the price of those, and then we're selling even more of them. And the black one, we basically just called it the wingman pair internally, because it was like everyone wants to have these glasses, but if this one's here, they buy them. And when we took that one off the site, people stopped buying them. We're like, this makes no sense, but it was just like whatever formula works, that's the formula we're going to stick to. We sold tons of it. We kept trying to launch new ranges, and people just wanted that one. That was it. As long as there were other glasses on the site, ideally plasticky ones that looked cheaper. I think it was the psyche of like, that looks cheap, so I'm going to buy these, which was amazing. But yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. And I think with the loudest customer as well, I definitely been guilty of you guys listening to the podcast. I've had the odd email going, Nick, stop talking about this. So I don't mention it for a while. And then the views start going down. And then 2 or 3 people emailing like, why do you never talk about that anymore? Like, for example, I usually used to talk about SEO, and someone said, stop talking about SEO. And I listened to that one person, and I really shouldn't have. So I think you're absolutely right. So I guess what's a good way then of listening to more of the majority? Is it looking in the data of what people buy? Is it talking to customers, a bit of everything? Is there something else in there that you guys do?
Dollar data is king. Royalty a lot of the time to see what is actually selling and what hasn't sold, especially with the sunglass store you were just saying. So that's the biggest thing I rely on. But I otherwise was fortunate to get a lot of information from talking to customers, because I also, for a brief period was offering phone ordering, because a lot of despite my original efforts to have democratized suspenders or braces to the masses of a diverse group, naturally a large segment of my customer base was an older man. And that older man had still been surprisingly underserved by e-commerce, especially in COVID and beyond, where they didn't necessarily know how to even with Shopify's like most fastest checkout process in the world, they didn't know how to use websites for that. So I offered like a phone ordering. So I'd end up having conversations with a lot of these people, and I'd have voicemails from them on the school voice number, and that phone was ringing off the hook. And being able to have some of that data from people live and understanding their process, or trying to even walk them through ordering suspenders online, or offering what would maybe traditionally be like a B2B customer support for just a D2C brand, ended up providing a ton of value as well.
Yeah. Interestingly, he ended up being a guest as well. I got an email from a company I bought a couple of jumpers from, and I loved their jumpers, and they're all made from recycled bottles and everything. I won't say who they are because I want to tell you something about the conversation and don't want to name and shame him, but you know who you are if you're listening. But anyway, I got an email from the CEO saying, hey, we saw you bought these. You're based in a really interesting location for us in the UK, and you bought a couple of very interesting products. And we saw the feedback you left us on Trustpilot, which was a 5-star. I was really happy. 5-star. And I said, it's amazing they do this and this. And the CEO had emailed me to basically to say, like, you seem to be one of the most clued up customers we've had. You know, basically everything about our products, and you put it in like 3 lines on TripAdvisor. And I said, oh, that's very flattering. And he said, we'll send you a 3rd jumper for free if I can just borrow you for 10 minutes on the phone. I was like, yeah, fine. We spoke for an hour. He became a guest on the podcast, and he's now become a client because he realized that I run an agency. So I quite quickly was like going through the whole e-com journey, telling him all the bad bits and what needs to happen. So that was fascinating. But I did ask him, like, how many people are you phoning up? And he said, I'm aiming to do about 2,000 a year. That's a few a day. Like, that's a lot of people. And I was like, is that really worth your time? And he's like, 100%. He's like, any data you give me, nothing changes. So he said, record all the calls. As soon as I get on the phone, I start writing down who I think they are. And then we might even try and find them on Facebook to see a picture of them. Try and write down what demographic I think they are, how old they are, what kind of questions they've got for me, what we should improve about the product. It was amazing, actually, just seeing that level of customer research. But you must have had a lot of that actually going on these phone conversations, certainly with the older demographic.
Yeah, totally. And it happens really inadvertently too, where I remember one phone conversation with a man in California who essentially told me that he would pay anything if I like made cool, aggressive pattern suspenders. He was like, I don't care about price. Whereas the same day I was getting like 15 comments on an ad saying like, your prices are insanely expensive. This is like burglary. Like, you guys are the worst, and getting all this like hate comments for our suspenders. Meanwhile, I'm on the phone with a guy who's like, I'll pay you $200 per suspender if you make me something really cool. And it's even some of those customers on both sides who, sometimes it's the customer who was complaining you're too expensive who ends up buying suspenders from you. And sometimes it's the person who said they would pay a ton who ends up not buying it. So just kind of understanding what each person is saying and seeing what their actions are based on it. Not necessarily that you're only like optimizing, you're only taking in input from people who are buying from you, but understanding that if that's something you want to optimize on, you kind of need the feedback from everybody who is and isn't purchasing to see which actually translates versus which are bits of feedback that are a little bit unrelated to them purchasing from you. And is it just feedback for the sake of feedback, which is great to note as well and to keep in your head. And I think why that CEO having 2,000 calls a year is really impactful, because if you only have 5 a year, that could be pretty skewed, 5 people, depending on who you talk to. But if you get to a certain number, hopefully it's statistically significant.
Yes, we did that. And you guys might be listening. We had one client that sent a survey out and only like 2 people filled it out. And then they got their sales team to phone people, and then they got hold of one who said, oh, I don't really use the internet. Are you sure I ordered online? I was like, oh no, this is not our time. And I was trying to prove a point. Again, I don't know if you guys listen or not. I think you might, but I was trying to prove a point a little bit to be like, I don't think your demographic's who you think it is. And when they asked me, well, who is it? I said, well, I don't know. That's the problem. We've got a complete mix of genders, a mix of locations, and a complete mix of products. Like, people, look for one thing and buy something else. Let's roll back to something you mentioned earlier that I think is a really key point to a lot of our listeners about venture capitalists providing funding. Here's okay, you've made your first $100,000. Here's $500,000. Go and make us the next chunk, and we'll take a percentage of profit or whatever, or pay us back at some point. You made a very good point. And as someone who works in PPC, I'm not precious at all and was not offended at all. And I actually agree with you that so much of that money from venture capitalists, I think you said 50%, ends up going in the pockets of Meta and Google and similar advertising platforms, or Amazon. And it's just kind of lost at that point. Why do you think that is? Let's unpack this a little bit.
Fantastic question. And I think a lot of the time it's so easy to cut that check immediately because everybody in the supply chain of capital has pressure on them, right? Any venture capital firm, near the end of certain time periods, they have to deploy whatever capital they have. Their LPs are getting mad at them if they still have the money. Like, it's not good to sit on money. It's like you're a little bit in trouble if you do, in trouble if you don't. So if you spend the money on bad investments, people are mad. If you don't spend the money, they're mad that you didn't spend it because they could have had the money somewhere else instead of giving it to you. The same thing, then that kind of pressure from LPs to VCs is the same thing that happens to the startups themselves, where if a VC gives you $1 million, there's a timeline associated with that. They didn't give you $1 million for you to spend slowly over 10 years. And a lot of the name of the game for VC is really burning fast and trying to get a lot of that acquisition at the top. And one reason why Facebook and Google, or Meta and Google, can get that money quickly is because they offer pretty like tried and true product. Like, it's been used for a long time. If I spend all of your money running like Meta and Google ads and my company doesn't work, you're not going to be that mad at me. Whereas if I spent all my money running newspaper ads and it didn't work, you'd be like, why? That was silly. Like, everybody's advertising on Meta and Google. That's how advertising, that's where acquisition is happening in D2C and a lot elsewhere. So I think it's almost safer to just blow your money on Meta and Google because nobody's really going to blame you too much for it. But in reality, I mean, I've always been more bootstrapped, so I don't necessarily, and I think with a lot of Meta and Google, it's very pay to play. And unless you are spending a lot of money per day, everything's not going to optimize correctly. And you're not going to actually be able to build out a full top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel to get people to purchase from you. And I don't mean it in like pure shade, because there are a lot of brands that do really well because they raise a lot of money and then they're able to deploy it really well on Meta and Google. And some brands are designed for it. I think it works really well. But for more bootstrapped companies, or if you don't necessarily have a ton of money, being able to lean on a product like Alia, where you can instead offer some of that funnel just on your own website and give customers a slice of that money in exchange for them like supporting your business, just is so much more appealing to me.
Yeah. And I think you get way more bang for your buck and I love that phrase, if you're spending it on Meta and on Google and driving that traffic in, and they're using something like Alia and actually engaging and learning about your business. I think the engagement and learning process as well means, what are the chances they're still going to be making purchases in 5, 10, 20 years time as a customer? It's a lot higher if they've been like, I've been with these guys, like the shower gel I wear. I won't shout them out because I'm definitely trying to get them on the podcast. And my thing was, I'm not mentioning you unless you come on. But I've been with them since the beginning. They sent me an email a while ago saying, we just want to say a massive thank you because you've been buying from us. You're one of our first, I think it was like 20,000 customers. And you're only one of those people that's still buying from us. And we're basically going to send you a free product. Choose whatever product you want on the site. It's like, it's not worth tons, but it's a really nice gift. It's a really nice gift. And I feel really valued. I'm going to stay with them for that. I think you touched on a really interesting point there, that it works for some brands and doesn't work for others. I think a really key thing here, and I don't want to get too political on this, but there's definitely an element of, if you give a certain person or organization, which is a group of people, if you give them a load of funding that they've been so bootstrapped until now, and you give them a big pot of cash, are they going to, do they really know what's going to work or how to spend that money? And I think it's the same way. If you took someone who has never had a sports car, and you suddenly give them a Lamborghini, are they going to know where to park it, how to drive it, how to get it serviced, how to put fuel in it? Are they going to know how to get it over a speed bump? It's things like that. And I think it goes a long way. I often use the phrase that you need to scale what's working. So if you're looking for capital, if you're looking for VCs, if you're looking for that because it's not profitable, you're just going to waste their money and your own time scaling something that isn't working. So I think you need to get certainly into the green at some point. There's no point getting VC capital if it's based on, okay, we're going to lower our production cost by 15%, it's going to make us profitable. It's like, if you're already profitable and you can lower those costs and increase advertising, which is working on the channels that's working, using stuff like Alia to actually get people to engage with it, or some really good CRO work you've done on the site, you're going to get a much better ROAS on it. I'm glad we spoke about it, because I think it's a really interesting point, but I'd certainly say, like, you scale what's working. And I think that's the danger when somebody suddenly goes, okay, we turn over 100K a year and, oh, look, there's $10 million suddenly. You're kind of like, as you say, you're under pressure to spend it. And you're like, you certainly do not want to be in a situation where it's like, who's going to take the money? And it's like, yeah, and I think, in my opinion, you should get in trouble if you have wasted it on Google or Meta, because even some clients, we don't take them on. We just say, like, we're not the right platform. Google's not the right thing for you. You need to go and look at Pinterest or Meta, or actually invest in just partnerships with other brands and do email.
Which I think is one of the most helpful things that you could even tell to a brand, because I think that's a big turnoff. If every agency thinks they can work with me, I think there's something wrong, because I have a very unique offering, and it's not necessarily going to work on Meta, Google. It's not going to work everywhere. So if you can't evaluate some of that, I kind of won't necessarily buy what you're telling me. So for you to be able to say, like, oh, this product isn't for us, like, this isn't actually our, like, bread and butter. I think that plays into exactly what you were saying too, with why VCs give money to repeat founders, because they were somewhat trustworthy, or they've already spent money on Meta and Google before, so we trust them to do it again, which plays into a bigger problem of how hard it is for first-time fundraisers, and how else can there be some proof there for folks to be able to test it, because at the same time, the people that end up taking risks are the ones that do get rewarded in a smaller percentage, but will have those, like, big payoffs. And there was one other note I wanted to share with what you were saying about Alia, for where it's driving traffic. There could be a better version of the traffic you're getting. And if you're running a traditional top of funnel ad where you're getting people onto your website for the very first time, if I have Alia running, it is going to make those visitors more useful, because it's actually going to inherently start to separate them. Where if my middle of funnel ad is typically targeting people who've been on my website within the last 30 days, that could be, 100 people coming from my top of funnel ad. But if I have Alia, where it's separating people who are then actually interacting with the website for, say, 60 seconds, my middle of funnel ad is probably going to instead target people that have spent over a minute on the website instead of just visited the website. So it might be a smaller number, but I'm spending less money targeting the people who actually didn't have intent. And being able to, like, filter that out early is really valuable.
It's a very good point. Very good point. Because I mean, we run a lot of PMAX campaigns, run a lot of retargeting campaigns, that kind of thing. And one of the biggest things I see when we take over a new account that's already been running PMAX is the audience signal they often put into that, or the retargeting they do, is they just go, anyone that's been on the website. And it's like, okay, fine. So, like, they've clicked on an ad before, they've been on the site, therefore they must have some level of interest. Some of those people might have bought from you. But actually, if you create a lookalike of your purchasers or your customers, or you actually just use your customers as an audience signal in PMAX. We took on a new account about a month ago, and don't quote me on this, anyone, because this doesn't happen every time. We took one on and we just changed the audience signal, and we're like, right, we're now going to spend 2-3 weeks rebuilding your shopping feed because it's rubbish. So we're going to rebuild that, but we're just going to put an audience signal in and set a higher and double the ROAS target. And if it doesn't work, you're going to save a bit of money, because you're making a 50% loss at the moment. So you can double the whole thing. Did that, and it took it 3 days, and bang, it was working. And I was kind of like, I might retire now. This is looking quite good. And then, of course, the client then said, like, well, what happens when we put the new feed? Is it going to go up even more? And I said, well, I don't know. I hope so. But it's going to take some beating. But even if it doesn't do that, the feed's going to use free shopping and other stuff. But I think it's so important that, as you say, it's if someone has then worked with Alia and actually used your tech, or use their tech on your website to engage with the brand and learn about the brand, they're worth retargeting now. They've already been through a hoop. They've kind of crossed the chasm of, I don't know about you and I don't care, to, well, I've actually spent a bit of time with you guys now, and I haven't purchased, which means I'm ripe for purchasing. And you don't know why I've not purchased yet. It could be I'm waiting for payday. It could be that I need to check with my other half, which is why I didn't buy today. So actually sending me the odd ad is a good little nudge to go, oh yeah, you should come and finish your purchase here. So imagine the retargeting campaigns must work so much better when they've gone through something like that.
Yeah, completely. And you also get to rely on some of the novelty of it, where watching a friend go on the internet the other day, I honestly forget the example, but I was going to a website and I was showing like how to do like a few steps. And when she got to the website, in the corner, there's like the pop-up that led to, it was like part of the actual interface. And she needed to go into the pop-up to like click one of the things. But as the website loaded, she immediately exited out of it, like subconsciously. And I was like, oh, that was the thing. Like, we're so accustomed to all of these things that we now like totally zone them out. So Alia now has like this bit of novelty where, just like you were saying, if I've been on a website and I've interacted with Alia because it's kind of new, I am having a new experience. Whereas if Alia was on every single website for the past 5 years, it would kind of be like zoned out a little bit. So to be able to lean on that to now filter out and create retargeting campaigns off of that can be a really high impact.
Yeah, amazing. Well, look, I've just seen the time, Tyler, so we'll bring things into land now. If people want to get in touch with you, this is my final question. What's the best way they can reach out? How can they check out the website? How can they follow you on socials?
Totally. The website is betterthanbelts.com. Everything on social media is at betterthanbelts. I invite anybody who has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. It's just tyler@betterthanbelts.com or send a message on Instagram. We sell suspenders made in New York City that are versatile for you to dress up or dress down. I often just wear them with a t-shirt and you will get compliments.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Tyler. It's been great to have you on. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much, Nick. It was really great chatting with you, and I appreciate getting the time.
Awesome. And for everybody listening, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, leave us a little review, and we'll be back again next week. Thank you so much for tuning in.